What's your favorite creepy campfire story? I've posted this before. One year, a group of us went camping in Kearney, Ontario, where we always go camping. Whenever we go, we always form our tents in a big circle, with the fire pit in the middle of us. We've been drinking, smoking a few joints, and a few of us were tripping balls on shrooms. The first night we were there, this guy randomly walks into our circle, introduces himself, I can't remember the name he gave, that he was in the military, and decided to take some vacation to camp out a bit. He asked if he could join our fire, as it was getting late, and he didn't buy any firewood. Being the friendly stoned people we are, we let him join our fire. He even pitched in some money for the firewood. The night went on, and we all were having a good time. One by one, our group started heading off to bed, me being either the second or third. I remember waking up to the sound of someone talking, and the fire being started. It was 4 in the morning. I peeped out my tent, and saw the random just sitting on a log by the fire, talking to himself. Still tripping on shrooms, I thought to myself I'm in no condition to deal with this, and chalked it up to me just tripping out. I wake up the next day and everyone is still alive, thankfully, and the fire is smoldering. We looked to the next campsite, where the random was staying, and it was spotless, no garbage, no tracks in the trail around the site, no nothing. We all started talking about him, just to be sure we all saw him. Through talking, we managed to figure out that he must not have slept at all. The last 2 of our group passed out just after 3:30 am. The first person got up just after 6 am and noticed he was gone. The rest of the camping trip went well, and we all went home. Fast forward maybe 4 to 5 years, I flip on the news and there is a picture of someone I could swear I recognize. He was arrested for a bunch of crimes, including rape and murder. Guess who it was? It was the random guy who joined our fire. I don't know why I remembered his face, but I guess it was just a weird situation where my brain right clicked and saved as a JPEG in my brain. Now, I have no way of proving if it was the same guy. We didn't take any pictures of the random, but the picture jump started my memory and made me instantly remember the weird random fire joiner. Either that, or they looked identical to the same person. Either way, was creepy. There was a Brit who was driving through Ireland as the weather got progressively worse and day soon turned to night. He suddenly realized that he was on the wrong road, but there was nowhere to turn around, so he pressed on, barely able to see the road through the rain. Without warning, his car just died. No battery, no engine. He assumed water must have shorted something, and he'd best start walking. He was soaking wet in 100 yards, but he continued walking. An hour later, he heard a noise behind him, and turned to see a car coming very slowly up the road behind him, its lights very dim. As it reaches him, he reaches out through the torrential rain, and opens the back door and jumps in. Shocked, he is the only person in the car. There is no one driving, and no other passengers. He freezes with fear as the car slowly continues up the road through the pouring rain. Before long a village comes into view and the car creeps silently and slowly into the village. The Brit spies a pub, so he jumps out and runs inside, not looking back. Panting with horror, he orders a beer and sits down. A minute later 2 soaking wet Irishmen come into the pub. The taller one points at the Brit and says that's him Paddy. That's the bastard I saw jump out of the car we were pushing. I remember that one of my Cub Scout leaders told us on a campout when I was Prob 7. It took place during pioneer times. A man and his wife traveled west in hopes of either striking it rich with gold, or at worst, finding a nice plot of land to settle down on and farm, manifest destiny and whatnot. A few months into their journey they come across just the spot. A beautiful plot of land to make their new home. Winter would be coming in a couple months, so they build a hasty shack and figure they'll hunker down there for the winter and build a more established house in a few months when the weather is more permitting. They don't worry, as the area is teeming with wildlife for hunting and trapping, so they figure they'll be set for food. A couple of months go by and the winter is bitter cold and unrelenting. They finished off the last of their food stash, and they haven't seen so much as a squirrel in weeks. They're both slowly starving and freezing to death as they huddle in their shack, day after day with no end in sight. The man's wife is delirious with hunger. Fearing that they will soon be dead, he decides to go for a hunt. He musters the energy to bundle up and heads out, determined to stay out as long as it takes to find them both some food. A couple of days pass as the man takes shelter under impromptu stick shelters, keeping warm with a campfire in the nighttime and hunting in the daytime. Nearly frozen to death, mercifully the man spots a beautifully plump rabbit several yards away. He takes aim with his musket and bang. It's a perfect shot. With a newfound energy the man runs home, giddy to finally feast with his wife. What he doesn't know is that while he was gone, his wife had discovered some tasty flesh of her own. Literally, the hunger had driven her insane, causing her to believe that her now frostbitten fingertips were ladyfinger cookies. She started off with a few nibbles here and there, slowly pulling the flesh away from her bones. After just a couple of hours both hands were nothing but bone. So she worked her way up her arms to the elbow. The feeling of something in her stomach just continued to drive her further until she had chewed away at every last bit of skin she could reach, culminating in her chewing off her own lips. The husband approached the shack with his, now frozen, kill when he got an uneasy feeling. Fearing the worst, he steps up to the door and slowly opens it, expecting to see his wife's corpse shriveled on the floor. But instead what he finds is even worse. This zombie-like creature with exposed teeth and bones writhing on the floor at the sight of him, chomping its jaws with an insatiable hunger. At that point, one of the scouts screeched for the leader to stop, which I was extremely thankful for, as it was easily the most terrifying thing I had ever heard at the age of 7. The scout leader told it with real conviction too. Honestly still gives me the creeps if I go camping and happen to think about it sitting around a fire. My family had one called the man in the con, or beans in the corn. There was once a hobo who was stealing ears of corn from a local man's garden. Now food was hard to come by, and someone stealing that which you're growing was especially frustrating. The man saw the hobo in the garden and fired a shotgun shot over the hobo's head. The next day, the hobo was back there again stealing ears of corn. The man decided he would teach the hobo a lesson. So he poured all the lead shot out of his shotgun shells and filled them with small dry beans. The very next day the hobo was back in the cornfield again, and the man fired twice on the hobo, and the hobo screamed and ran down the corn rows fast, pleading the whole way. The man watched for days, but the hobo was never seen again. Some days later, the man still had bean shells in his shotgun, so he aimed at a plank of wood standing over by his well. The plank ripped to pieces. When the next planting seasons came, the farmer walked his cornfield to its far corners to cut corn husks and prepare to plow. Along the way, he found tiny bean plants coming up through the soil, one here, another there, all lining up to lead him to a big bunch of beans coming up along the edge of the field. When he went to examine the bunch of beans, he first saw shoe soles turned to one side, and then the outline of a body sank in the mud and soil. He realized he had killed a hobo, and the random beans that had fallen out of his body had sprouted along the way. My father had bought that particular farm during the war years, and he said for 20 years, random bean plants would show up in that field. Any bean plant that showed up in our garden was given the chance to grow, and one year there was a bean planted that wrapped around a corn stalk. My father did not harvest the corn ears on that plant. Gosh, let's see if I can recall it correctly. There was a body of a fairly large person, once found in the woods. They were quickly killed, and there was nothing extremely off about the scene, except he had half of his pointer, ring, and pinky finger all missing from his left hand. No one could find the missing fingers, and they never found any clues. A few weeks later, another body was found, another man who was a bit smaller than the previous guy. Same situation. Quickly killed, and 3 fingers missing all from the left hand, and still no clues. A few more weeks went by, and this time it was a woman who was found, smaller than the second guy found, same fingers missing from the same hand. This went on for a while, with the victims getting smaller and smaller, until it was kids' bodies being found. One teenager's body though, only had the ring finger and pinky finger removed. The police found a fingerprint at this crime scene, and they found it matched the prints from a theft record from the previous victim. The guy telling the story then told the kids that the killer was searching to replace his fingers, and so far, he had yet to see if the fingers of children their age would fit. He then took off his glove, showing he had a scarred pointer finger and was missing half his ring and pinky finger, and then lunged at the kids while screaming. He later told the kids he lost the two in a work accident, and doctors were able to save his very mangled pointer finger. He told this story every year at camp. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to consider the idea to maybe think about potentially subscribing. Peace.